What you're about to hear today is something you've almost certainly never been told before. Not because it isn't real, but because it doesn't fit into the history we're used to hearing. All around the world, there are ancient places that still confuse experts. Structures too advanced for their time. Artifacts found where they shouldn't exist. And sites that suggest entire civilizations rose and vanished long before written history began. These are not myths. These are not legends. They are real discoveries, documented, studied, and still debated. And the deeper you look into them, the stranger they become. So get comfortable. Let the outside world fade away. Tonight, we're exploring some of the most mysterious discoveries of the ancient world. And we begin in a place cold, silent, and forgotten by time. Deep within the Ural Mountains of central Russia, there's a silent landscape of forests, wetlands, and peat bogs. At first glance, it feels empty, untouched, ordinary. But hidden beneath this quiet surface, time preserved something that would later challenge everything we assume about early humans. In 1890, workers cutting peat uncovered fragments of carved wood buried deep in waterlogged soil, would rarely survive for thousands of years, let alone millennia. Yet these fragments were different. Protected by oxygen-free mud, they remained intact for an unimaginable length of time. When archaeologists cleaned and assembled the pieces, they revealed a towering wooden figure, a monumental idol carved from a single tree trunk. Originally standing over 5 meters tall, it would have dominated the surrounding landscape like nothing else of its era. The surface of the idol was not smooth or decorative. It was covered in precise geometric patterns, zigzags, straight lines, repeating symbols, carefully carved with stone tools. And then there were the faces. Multiple human-like faces stacked vertically along its body, their hollow eyes staring outward in silence. Early scientific dating already stunned researchers, placing the idol at around 9,000 years old. But later radiocarbon analysis pushed that date even further back, over 12,000 years old. That makes the Shigir Idol older than Stonehenge, thousands of years older than the pyramids of Egypt. And this is where the mystery deepens. The idol was created during the Mesolithic period, a time when humans are often described as simple hunter-gatherers, focused purely on survival. Yet this object suggests something far more complex. The tree used to carve it was over 150 years old when it was cut. Its selection, shaping, and carving required planning, skill, and patience. Every line appears intentional. Every face seems placed with purpose. This was not random art. It was communication. But communication of what? Some archaeologists believe the idol represents a layered universe, sky, earth, and underworld, an early form of cosmology carved into wood. Others suggest it served as a territorial marker or a guardian of sacred land. Another theory proposes it recorded a myth, a story now lost to time, encoded in symbols we no longer understand. 7 distinct faces can still be identified. 7 silent witnesses from a world without writing. The idol once stood upright, likely visible from a great distance. In a landscape where few permanent structures existed, its presence would have been powerful, even intimidating. How it ended up in the bog remains uncertain. It may have been placed there intentionally as an offering, or it may have collapsed and slowly sunk into the swamp over centuries. What remains undeniable is this. 12,000 years ago, humans were capable of abstraction, symbolism, and monumental expression. The Shigir Idol forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our ancestors were not as simple as we once believed. And if this level of thought existed so far back in time, what else have we failed to recognize? On the outskirts of modern-day Amman, Jordan, lies the ancient settlement of Ain Ghazal, the spring of the gazelle. Between roughly 7,250 and 5,000 BC, this site grew into one of the largest Neolithic communities ever discovered. Thousands of people lived here. They farmed crops, domesticated animals, and built rectangular mud brick houses with plaster floors. Ain Ghazal represents a turning point in human history, when small villages began transforming into complex, organized communities. But beneath these homes, archaeologists uncovered something deeply unsettling. Life-size human statues. Discovered accidentally during construction work in the 1980s, these figures were buried carefully in pits beneath house floors. They were not stone and not simple clay figurines. They were made from bundles of reeds coated in white lime plaster, shaped into human form. Their eyes were dark, made from bitumen and disturbingly lifelike. Some statues had elongated necks. Some had two heads emerging from a single body. None showed emotion. And perhaps most strangely of all, they were buried almost immediately after being made. Creating these statues required enormous effort. Lime plasters produced by heating limestone to extremely high temperatures, consuming vast amounts of wood. For a Neolithic society, living in a semi-arid environment, this was a costly investment. So why make them only to hide them? No two statues are exactly alike, yet they all follow the same proportions. This suggests planning, cooperation, and shared belief. Many archaeologists believe the statues represent ancestors, created as substitutes of the dead, to keep them symbolically present within the household. Others believe they represent gods, spirits, or protective beings. The double-headed figures may symbolize duality, life and death, earth and sky, past and future. Beneath Ain Ghazal, archaeologists also discovered burials under floors, sometimes with skulls removed and plastered. This practice appears across the Neolithic Near East, indicating a belief system where the dead continued to influence the living. The statues may have been part of communal rituals, used once and then buried to seal their power. By around 6,500 BC, Ain Ghazal began to decline. Environmental studies show deforestation and soil exhaustion. Food production faltered. The statues may have been created during this time of crisis, as part of ceremonies meant to restore balance or seek protection. Their meaning has been lost, but their existence proves something profound. Even at the dawn of civilization, humans were not just surviving, they were believing, remembering, and creating symbols for ideas too powerful to be spoken. High in the Andes Mountains of central Peru, far above the valleys and cities below, lies a remote plateau known as Marcahuasi. Rising more than 4,000 meters above sea level, this harsh and isolated landscape feels almost unreal. The air is thin, the wind is constant, and the silence is overwhelming. At first glance, Marcahuasi appears to be nothing more than an expanse of volcanic rock. But as you move across the plateau, something strange begins to happen. Shapes emerge. Profiles form. Massive stones begin to resemble faces, animals, and figures carved directly into the mountainside. From certain angles, the resemblance is unmistakable. A human face with a long nose and deep-set eyes. A lion crouched in stone. A frog frozen mid-movement. Entire scenes seem to appear when sunlight strikes a rock in just the right way. And then as clouds pass or shadows shift, the figures vanish again, dissolving back into abstraction. This shifting reality has divided researchers for decades. Geologists argue that Marcahuasi is the result of natural erosion. The plateau is composed of volcanic tuff, a soft rock created millions of years ago by massive eruptions. Over time, wind, rain, freezing temperatures, and gravity fractured and shaped the stone into unusual forms. According to this explanation, the faces are nothing more than coincidence, amplified by the human tendency to recognize patterns, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. But not everyone is convinced. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient peoples were active on the plateau. Stone ruins, terraces, tombs, and pottery fragments are scattered across the area, indicating ceremonial use. These were not random visitors. They returned to this place repeatedly, suggesting that Marcahuasi held special meaning. In Andean belief systems, mountains were not lifeless objects. They were living entities known as apis, powerful spirits that watched over the land and the people below. Natural features such as rocks, peaks, and caves were believed to be manifestations of these spirits. If a mountain already appeared to have a face, it may have been considered sacred. Some researchers propose that Marcahuasi represents a collaboration between nature and human belief. The rock formations may be natural, but ancient people could have subtly modified them, carving, smoothing, or enhancing features to emphasize what they already saw. Over thousands of years, erosion would have blurred any clear signs of human intervention, leaving behind shapes that exist somewhere between sculpture and stone. The most famous formation on the plateau is known as the Monument to Humanity. It is a massive cliff face that appears to show multiple human profiles looking in different directions. Some observers claim to see faces representing different ages, genders, or even different cultures. Under direct sunlight, the illusion is striking. Under shadow, the faces disappear completely. This transformation gives Marcahuasi an almost living quality. The landscape changes from hour to hour, responding to light, weather, and perspective. What appears obvious at one moment becomes invisible the next. Marcahuasi's location may also hold astronomical significance. The plateau offers wide, unobstructed views of the sky. Many ancient Andean cultures built ceremonial centers on elevated ground, aligning structures with solar and lunar cycles. It is possible that Marcahuasi served as a place of observation, ritual, or pilgrimage, chosen as much for its dramatic natural forms as for its position among the mountains. The journey to Marcahuasi is difficult. Narrow trails wind upward through thin air and unpredictable weather. Such a journey itself may have been ritualistic, separating the sacred from the ordinary. Reaching the plateau could have symbolized entering a space closer to the heavens. No written records explain Marcahuasi's purpose. No inscriptions identify its builders. All that remains is stone, wind, and silence. Whether the figures of Marcahuasi are illusions created by nature or the remnants of ancient intention remains unresolved. But the question itself may be the point. Marcahuasi exists in the space between certainty and belief, where meaning is shaped as much by perception as by fact. And as clouds drift across the plateau and shadows move across the stone, the faces of Marcahuasi seem to appear and disappear, reminding us that some mysteries are meant to be experienced, not solved. High in the cloud forests of northern Peru, where mist drifts endlessly between steep mountain ridges, lived a people later known as the Chachapoya. Their settlements clung to mountain tops and cliff edges, hidden among thick vegetation and sudden weather changes. To later chroniclers, they became known as the warriors of the clouds. The Chachapoya built circular stone houses, fortified settlements, and cliffside tombs carved high above the valleys. Their cities, such as Quilap, reveal careful planning, defensive walls, and a strong sense of communal effort. Life in this environment demanded constant awareness of the land and the sky. Weather could shift without warning. Clouds could close in within minutes. Survival required attention to every sign. Among the stories passed down through generations, one account stands apart from all others. It is not a myth of gods or creation, but the memory of a terrifying event, a great flame in the sky. According to accounts later recorded by Spanish chroniclers, the Chachapoya remembered a night when the heavens burned. A fiery object streaked across the sky, illuminating the mountains and filling the air with fear. Some versions describe a loud noise. Others speak of the sky, glowing as if day had briefly returned to the night. For a society that believed the natural world was alive with meaning, such an event could not be ignored. The sky was not distant or abstract. It was an active force, capable of sending messages, warnings, or signs of change. A flame moving across the heavens would have been interpreted as something powerful and intentional. What could the sky flame have been? One of the most likely explanations is a meteor or bolide. These objects enter Earth's atmosphere at extreme speed, heating rapidly and often exploding in a brilliant flash of light. Such events can be seen across vast distances and can produce shock waves loud enough to frighten entire communities. Even in the modern world, people who witness large fireballs rarely forget them. Another possibility is a comet. Bright comets can remain visible in the night sky for weeks, sometimes appearing as flaming objects with long, glowing tails. Across many ancient cultures, comets were recorded as omens or signs of major change. A particularly bright comet could easily become remembered as a flame moving through the sky. Some researchers have suggested distant volcanic activity. While the Chachapoya region itself has no major volcanoes, eruptions elsewhere in the Andes can illuminate the sky, sending glowing ash clouds or reflecting light across vast areas. To observers without scientific explanations, the sky itself would appear to be burning. What makes the Chachapoya account remarkable is how it survived. It was not recorded as symbolic mythology, but as a remembered event. Spanish writers described it as something ancestors claimed to have witnessed. This suggests it left a deep emotional impact, strong enough to endure long after the Chachapoya had been conquered by the Inca. Archaeology offers additional clues. Chachapoya ritual spaces were often integrated into their settlements. Circular structures, offering pits, and symbolic carvings suggest a worldview in which celestial events held spiritual importance. The sky flame would have been interpreted through this lens, possibly becoming a focal point in ritual or storytelling. The Chachapoya also practiced complex burial traditions. Mummies were placed in caves or cliffside sarcophagi, positioned to overlook the valleys below. These practices suggest a belief in continued connection between the living, the dead, and the landscape. A dramatic sky event would have reinforced the idea that the heavens and earth were closely linked. No physical evidence of the sky flame remains. No crater has been identified. No artifact confirms its cause. But the memory itself is evidence of something extraordinary. Oral traditions often preserve real events, even as details change over time. The story of the sky flame reminds us that ancient people were careful observers of the natural world. When something unusual happened, they watched, remembered, and passed the story forward. In a world without written records, memory was history. And as clouds continue to drift over the mountains of northern Peru, the sky above the Chachapoya homeland remains vast and unpredictable. Somewhere between science and memory, the flame still burns, not in the sky, but in the stories that refuse to fade. As we step back from these ancient places, one thing becomes clear. The past is not silent. It is simply difficult to understand. Across the world, traces of forgotten people still remain. Wooden monuments older than civilization itself. Human figures buried with care, never meant to be seen again. Mountains that seem to watch those who walk among them. Stories of fire falling from the sky, remembered long after the witnesses are gone. Each of these mysteries tells us something important, not just about the ancient world, but about ourselves. For a long time, history has been presented as a straight line, a simple progression from ignorance to knowledge, from primitive beginnings to modern understanding. But these discoveries suggest something very different. They show us that early humans were not merely surviving. They were thinking. They were observing. They were creating meaning in a world they did not fully control. They carved symbols into wood. They shaped human forms from plaster and reed. They chose sacred landscapes where earth and sky seemed to meet. And when something extraordinary happened above them, they remembered it. Much of this history was never written down. It was carved, buried, whispered, and passed from generation to generation. And because of that, much of it has been lost. What remains are fragments, broken patterns, unfinished stories. And yet, those fragments are powerful. They remind us that knowledge does not always survive in books or records. Sometimes it survives in silence, in soil, in stone, and in memory. Archaeology does not give us clear answers. It offers possibilities. And those possibilities can be unsettling. They force us to accept that the ancient world was complex, emotionally rich, spiritually deep, and often far more advanced in thought than we expect. There's still questions with no answers, and perhaps there always will be. What did the faces on the Shigir Idol truly mean? Why were the statues of Ain Ghazal created only to be buried? Were the forms of Marcahuasi shaped by human hands, or by belief itself? And what exactly burned across the sky above the Chachapoya homeland? These mysteries remain open, not because we have failed to solve them, but because some truths resist certainty. And maybe that's the point. History is not only about knowing, it is about wondering. Every unanswered question invites us to look deeper, to listen more carefully, to accept that the past does not belong to us. We only glimpse it. As time moves forward, erosion will continue, landscapes will change, and new discoveries will rise from the ground, bringing with them new questions. Some will challenge what we think we know. Others will quietly rewrite the story of who we are. Until then, these ancient mysteries remain, waiting, watching, and reminding us that the human story is far older and far stranger than we often imagine. If you've enjoyed this journey into the unknown, there are many more stories still buried beneath the surface. And as we continue to explore them together, remember one thing: the greatest mysteries of history are not always hidden in the dark. Sometimes they are right beneath our feet. Until next time, stay curious.